Hey guys, it's me, Adam. If I haven't met you before, I am the campus pastor here at our Corona location, but I'm actually away speaking somewhere else this weekend. But in my place to take us into part 3 of this series, The Thing Behind the Thing, is our student director, Mariah Wells. Now hold on your applause. There's gonna be a second for it, but I gotta tell you guys, I am so excited for you to get to hear from her this weekend. I've gotten a peek at her notes, and what she has to say, I think, is going to be so insightful. You may not know this, but Mariah has actually been coming to this church since she was in junior high, and now she's in charge of all of our high school and junior high ministries. And so it's such a full circle moment every time she gets up to talk. But don't let the fact that she's kind of young fool you. She is brilliant and interesting and insightful and funny, and I think you're gonna get so much out of today. So buckle up, get ready to take some notes, and make some crazy noise for our guest speaker today, Mariah Wells.
Good morning. I'm so excited. I really didn't know there was an intro until this morning, and I prepared an intro. I was like, I don't know, what if I don't look like Adam, so I was going to have to explain I wasn't him. I'm really glad he had an intro. Throughout this past month, we have been going through a series called Primal Question. No, that's not what it's called. It's called The Thing Behind the Thing, where we're talking about these primal questions we have that are kind of left unanswered in us. And we went through the first one last week, but today we get to go through the second one. And the title of my message today is Get Your Own. And before I jump in, I just wanted to stop and say, like, we are currently living a time where it's really stressful. Like, there's so much division and there's so much disagreement, and it's hard. But I really believe, like, the one thing that binds us, that really connects us, is that no matter who you are, we all have someone in our life who is constantly trying to get a bite of our food when we have it. And no matter what it is and how much you've been looking forward to it, no matter if they have their own food, they want yours. And it's frustrating because they're always, can I have a bite? Or better yet, they just get their little fork, like a little food bandit, and they take it off of your plate because they just feel so entitled to what you have. And maybe for you, that person is a small child, hopefully your small child, or it's your significant other, or just someone that's way too comfortable eating your food, getting their little thingies up in your food. And it's terrible. But my husband, John, specifically has a really hard time with this. For some reason, the people in his life, they just feel so comfortable with him because he's so sweet and, like, kind that everyone's like, he'll let me share. So they all like, let me give a little nibble. And it's frustrating because he has this one person that follows him around, like, everywhere. And they always are taxing him. I am that person. I'm not going to lie to you. And I feel you backing away a little bit because I know it's a problem, for sure. But I tax him. And even if I'm eating the exact same thing as he's eating, I want a little bit. I want a little bit of what he has. And I don't know why, but there was this one night where I had the house all to myself. And my thought was, this is going to be so nice. I got my nicest jammies on, and I had Brooklyn Nine-Nine on the TV. And exactly. And I remembered that we had so much leftover ice cream from a birthday party we had. And I was like, I'm going to eat ice cream. This is going to be great. So as I've gotten my bowl, I'm pumped. John comes home, great. Like a sweet person he is, he's just like, hi, how's your day? Whatever. And I had a clear mission for how this night would go. And he's just like, oh, can I get a bite of your ice cream? Oh, how the tables have turned. And so I was like, oh, we have plenty of ice cream in the freezer. And he's just like, I know. Can I just have a bite? And I was like, yeah, there's plenty in the freezer. Like, we have all these flavors. And he's like, well, I don't want a whole bowl. I just kind of want a bite of yours. And I was like, oh, totally, I hear you. But the thing is, this one's mine, and I can go I will make you your own. I will go to the store and buy you ice cream that you want. But this one's mine. Mind you, while we're having this conversation, I am slowly, like, pushing the bowl, like protecting it with the ferocity of a mother bear protecting her cub. I was like, you are not getting it. And so he's like, Mariah, really? This is so hypocritical. You tax all my food. And I'm like, John, I need you to go get your own. I need you to get your little spoon away from me. And I need you to go figure it out. And I lost. He did get some ice cream, so it's fine. Yep. He feels too victorious right now. But I've always been this way. I don't know why. I will buy you your own. I don't know why. I'm only really this way with John. But I feel like I can justify it with the fact that I grew up with 2 older brothers and no food was safe in this house. And now I feel the need to protect my ice cream. But some people, this impulse to gather and like hoard and protect goes deeper than your ice cream, which is precious, by the way. But some of us feel this way about everything because we have a scarcity mentality. I mean, we're always afraid of never having enough or of everything being taken away from us at any given moment. And often, the people who struggle with this grew up in environments where they watched their parents struggle to pay the bills, and they often heard a lot of arguments about money. I mean, they were usually told, like, you can't go do that thing because we can't afford it. And maybe either mom or dad left or died, and all of the financial responsibility was piled onto one person. One way or another, this person learned that from a young age that I have to take care of myself because no one else is going to. And this can result in us internalizing the primal question of, am I secure? Like, do I have the resources to take care of myself? And this question is not limited to people who grew up without money because, I mean, it seems that even people who grew up with a lot of money are equally getting crushed by the weight of holding on to what they have. Because no matter how much you have, it never feels like enough. I mean, you always feel the need to hustle a little more, and you're always afraid of losing everything you have. And you don't even really like that you're this way because it's exhausting. You're so tired. You're so anxious of just hoarding your ice cream or your thing, and it impacts the people around you in ways you don't want it to. Like, you wish that when one of your kids got hurt, your first thought wasn't, oh my gosh, I hope this hospital bill is like not too high. Can we bandage a severed toe? Like, maybe just walk it off. You wish that your mental health was not contingent upon the fluctuating gas prices. You wish that you could spend the money you saved on what you saved it for instead of worrying that the second you use it, you're going to have needed it for something else. You wish that when your husband wrecked his car, your first concern was with his well-being and not with how this is going to spike your insurance premiums, because facial scarring heals, but bills are forever. But these primal questions, they bleed into how we live our lives. They bleed into the way we respond to things, the way we behave. We find ourselves acting on impulses we didn't even know were there. And when am I secure is your primal question, you probably have the following 5 impulses. You probably live in fear of running out. I mean, you feel so guilty when you spend any money on yourself, and you're kind of tempted to hide it from other people. You might stockpile things that you're nervous you'll run out of. Do you remember when there was no toilet paper? Because I do. I remember it vividly, and we were worried that we would run out. I mean, you're worried that unexpected expenses could arise, and you panic thinking about it. You panic thinking it just could happen, even if it's a minor expense or it's an unlikely expense or if it's kind of impossible. But still, no matter how much you have, there's always this fear that it could all be taken away. And you also probably are operating under the impulse, following living in fear, that you got to overwork to ensure your security. Some of us take on multiple jobs. We work really long hours. We feel guilty if we're sitting still or have to take time off or take a break. Even if you're violently ill, you're like, this is time I could be using to make money. When everyone in your life is like, calm down, just take a breather. And you've probably never not had a side hustle or 5. I mean, the people closest to you may complain to you like, I really feel like you don't have time for me. I feel like you're always working. And you really care about your money because you meticulously track, plan, and save. Words are difficult. And you consistently check your accounts where you're like, who spent how much on what, and you have a rigid budget because you want to make sure you're being smart with your money, and you obsess over waste. And an example of this that I have observed in my own life is if there is a can of soda that has just like a little swig left, no one is leaving until you drink that, because that is a dime. We are not wasting money in this household. None of us are leaving until you finish the soda. And I mean, people think you're crazy, but you're just being responsible. You're constantly telling people, like, I wouldn't do that. It's such a waste of money. And usually they meet you with, like, their eyes rolling. And if someone compliments something of yours, you're like, thanks. I got it on sale 20 years ago. And you also probably maintain, connections for future benefits, because even if you don't like them, you might need them later. I mean, you have a lot of contacts in your phone, but very few true friends, because you don't like when things get too deep, because we don't like relationships we're not in control of. And our relationships feel like we're constantly trying to just please and appease people to stay in their good graces so that we don't lose this potential benefit. And it kind of leads us to the fifth impulse, to assume that any generosity is going to short your family. I mean, you don't mind sharing or donating things just as long as you're done with it, you don't need it, you never liked it, or it doesn't cost you anything, really. I mean, you assume that anyone who has less than you is probably just irresponsible or lazy. And you tell yourself, like, once I have what I need, then I'm going to give. But we never seem to have what we need. And you probably get annoyed when people ask you to contribute. And this reminds me of the very clear no soliciting signs that some of us have. They have very clear threats to those who dare solicit anyways. But why is that? I mean, some people think you're crazy or you're paranoid, but you kind of agree with King Solomon when he says, I hated all the things I had toiled for under the sun, because I must leave them to the one who comes after me. And who knows whether that person will be wise or foolish. Yet they will have control over all the fruit of my toil, into which I have poured my effort and skill under the sun. This too is meaningless. So my heart began to despair over all my toilsome labor under the sun. Solomon was going through it. But he makes a good point where he's just like, I work so hard and I try my best and it could still all be taken away. But what are you supposed to do when you're preoccupied with making sure you have enough to take care of yourself and your family, but you're so anxious all the time? And there's actually a story about this in the Old Testament in the book of 1 Kings. It starts in chapter 17 in verse 8. Then the Lord said to Elijah, Go and live in the village of Zarephath, near the city of Sidon. I have instructed a widow there to feed you. And at the time that Elijah's in, there is a severe drought and famine throughout all of the land. And his first thought was oh my gosh, I have to leave. I have a perfect setup here, because God was giving him food from birds at the time. And he left because he trusted God is going to take care of me, by a widow that he did not know. And in verse 10, it says, So he went to Zarephath, and as he arrived at the gates of the village, he saw a widow gathering sticks, and he asked her, Will you please bring me a little water in a cup? And as she was going to get it, he called to her, Bring me a bite of food too. And some of you immediately hate this guy, because I do. I would be so frustrated if I was in the middle of a task and some strange man is just like, hey, I see that you're working really hard in the heat and you're doing your chores, but could you stop that and go get me water? And also, while you're at it, can I have a little bit of sourdough? Do you have? No? Okay. I wonder how frustrated she was. How quick she turned her neck back when he asked for the second thing. I mean, she's been in the middle of a drought. She doesn't have a husband that's there protecting her or providing for her. So she's all on her own for 3 years trying to provide for her son. And now somebody's just nonchalantly, no big deal, asking for resources. And she responds how I feel like I would also respond. She says, I swear by the Lord your God that I don't have a single piece of bread in this house. And I only have a handful of flour left in the jar and a little cooking oil in the bottom of the jug. I was just gathering a few sticks to cook this last meal, and then my son and I will die. So it takes a dark turn there. And I wonder if you've ever started a conversation with someone and then they just kind of unload on you, and then you realize too late that you've stepped on an emotional landmine that you just did not know was there. And this is what happens when you unknowingly stumble upon someone's primal question. You often get an oversized reaction. And I think it's really likely that this woman's primal question would be, am I secure? And for good reason. I mean, number one, she's a widow. When her husband died, she lost the person that was her main source of income, that was providing for her and her son. And the only work women were allowed to do at that time was prostitution and begging. And number two, she's in the middle of a famine and a drought, which if you're a beggar is horrible news, because people aren't really too keen on sharing their resources when there aren't very many resources. So she's in a really tough spot. And so when this guy comes in and says, hey, I know you don't have a lot, but can you give me some of what you do have? She is outraged and she's terrified because she's always lived in this fear of never having enough and of running out. So she instantly began scrambling. She's overworking, gathering these sticks to ensure the security of her son as she's preparing essentially their death meal. And she knows exactly she has, down to the drop, because she's so good at meticulously planning and saving. And when this man first came around and just asked for water, she was initially kind because she could use this later. She might need this person. But once he asks for something that she can't convince herself to give, her response is no. My generosity is going to short my family. I don't have anything more to give. And because Elijah was very sensitive and considerate, he says to her in verse 13, don't be afraid. Go ahead and do just what you said, but make a little bread for me first, and then use what's left to prepare a meal for yourself and your son. And I feel at this point in the story is where we would all be arrested for homicide, because that is so annoying. And it's possible that this guy is just kind of a jerk. And there's two possibilities of what's going on. One, he has no emotional intelligence and has no concept that the things he's saying are so inappropriate and irritating. Or number two, he's a skilled mentor who knows exactly what he's doing by pushing her buttons and bringing her to the end of herself to realize how much she needs God. And because he was a prophet, it was probably the second one, but we can't know for sure. And he says to this woman in verse 14, for this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. There will always be flour and olive oil left in your containers until the time when the Lord sends rain and the crops grow again. And he's trying to get her to realize that God is her ultimate provider, and that no matter how little you have, you always have something to contribute. Because that's where true meaning and fulfillment is found, not in stacking up on our own, but in contributing. And this reminds me of a psalm, is Psalm 23. And it says, the Lord is my shepherd, I lack nothing. And the implication here is that you don't have to take care of yourself because God is taking care of you. And this doesn't mean there's nothing for you to do. That doesn't mean that there's nothing for you to plan on. It just means that you can trust you're not on your own. Because learning to trust God to take care of your needs is where we find peace, not in stacking up for ourselves, because enough never really is enough. And because you realize that God is going to take care of you and all you have is from him, you can begin to open-handedly share with other people because you're like, this wasn't even mine to begin with. This is just stuff he gave me. And then you can give people whatever he wants you to because you know, oh, I know he's looking out for my needs, so I know I can give. And here's the big, mostly, I just want to say, I have learned there is always more ice cream. I can always give John some of my ice cream. But the big idea here is that when you're tempted to hoard money and control others, remind yourself that you have enough to be generous towards others. In verse 15, the story continues, and it says, so she did as Elijah said, and she and Elijah and her family continued to eat for many days. There was always enough flour and olive oil in the containers, just as the Lord had promised through Elijah. And I think this is showing us that like God is meeting our needs when we look beyond ourselves. And this isn't something we see only in the Old Testament, but we hear this from the mouth of Jesus in the New Testament. He says in Matthew 6:31-33, "So do not worry, saying, 'What shall we eat?' or 'What shall we drink?' or 'What shall we wear?' For the pagans run after these things, and your heavenly Father knows that you need them. But seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well." But notice, he doesn't say not to be wise or not to prepare. He says not to worry. I mean, yeah, you should definitely make a plan, think ahead, be smart with your money, but don't let it keep you up at night. Don't panic about it. Don't let it convince you that, my character isn't that important. I got to hold on to this resource, got to hold on to whatever it is. Don't let it rob you of your ability to be generous or convince you that your job is more important than your relationships. Because if the creator of the universe says he cares for you and will ensure that you have everything you need, all our job to do is to trust him, to be wise and generous with what we currently have and trust that we aren't going to run out. And you might be thinking, yeah, easier said than done. And I agree. It's such a beautiful idea, but it's hard to put into practice. And I have a couple practical ways for you, if this is your primal question. When your financial insecurities flare, remind yourself of all you do have, of everything you've already survived, and determine to use whatever you have to better the lives of others. I feel like sometimes we get a tunnel vision and we're like, oh my gosh, this thing is going to knock me out. It's going to wipe us out and we're not going to have what we need anymore. And it's sometimes helpful to remind, when have I felt this way before? When did I think this way before? What happened? Did it wipe us out, or were we okay? And I think we're playing I didn't even realize that maybe God was actually taking care of me in that season and I didn't even know. And using what we have to better the lives of others is being you know what? I know I'm afraid that I don't have enough, but I'm going to make sure that other people have enough, and I'm just going to try my best to trust that give God a chance to prove that he is going to take care of me. And maybe you're thinking, this is not my primal question, so this doesn't apply to me. And I assure you it is someone's primal question in your life. And if that is true, you can help them by, when their financial insecurities are flaring up, thank them for their caution. Remind them of the good that they have and how competent they are, and encourage them to prioritize community and generosity. Because when we're trying to feel secure, it comes from a place of I just want to make sure I have enough to take care of my family, to take care of myself, to survive. And it comes out of a place of just wanting to feel safe and making other people feel that way. So I think it's important. We're I thank you that you're trying to make sure we're okay. But we don't need to do it this way. And it just is a great way for you to partner alongside that person. And I'm really curious what your life looks like if you truly believed that the creator of the universe cared for your needs. Would you give more? Would you share meals with people? Would you invite people into your home? I wonder if you'd be more present with your family. Instead of pulling your hair out in fear of not having enough, would you have peace in knowing that you are abundantly and wholly cared for regardless of what you do? And I'm curious about how different your life would feel and how different you would feel, how the people in your life would be impacted. And this idea of just learning how to trust that God is our ultimate provider is what I want to pray into all of your lives today. So if you could bow your head and close your eyes. Lord, thank you for the opportunity for all of us to be here in your presence. Thank you for the opportunity to learn and to grow. It is sometimes so difficult to understand that we are not on our own. It's so difficult because some of us grew up feeling like we are the only people looking out for us. And it's hard to remember that you are looking out for us, that you are the ultimate provider in our lives. And God, I ask that you would help us to rest in peace. Rest in the peace of knowing that you care, that there is no one else that could provide our needs the way you do. That not only do you know what we need, but you meet them, and you don't just meet them at the minimum. You care for us abundantly. And God, I pray that we would become people that care for others abundantly. I pray that we would learn from your generosity, from how you provide for us, to extend that to other people. Lord, I pray that you would help us to trust that you will always provide for us, that we would continue to give you opportunities to prove our fears wrong. We love you, and it is in your name that we pray. Amen.